Welcome to a Cannaconvo episode of Cannabis Last Week, brought to you by Global Cannabis Times. I'm your host, John Puro. Now, before we get to an awesome interview, Cannaconvo, my first joint Cannaconvo, pun always intended, obviously, in this industry, I want to note that any opinions I express are my own and not those of my law firm, Zuber Lawler. And I always got to do my quick prayer to the video chat gods. May our Wi-Fi connections be sturdy. All dogs, children remain quiet, and may Amazon Prime another time. Amen. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing Ramon Reyes, a co-founder and the chief strategy officer, and also David Hernandez, right, the director of brand development of Happy Munkey. So I'm very familiar with Happy Munkey, obviously coming out of New York. But since we have, viewers across the country and some international, you guys want to, introduce Happy Munkey to the audience?
Sure. Happy Munkey. We're a lifestyle brand, hail out of New York City. Most of us are born and raised in New York City. We New York City native. We're proud, and that's what we pride ourselves with as far as where we come from and where does the brand personality come from. Yeah, we're just some New Yorkers with a weed brand. I know David probably want to say more, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, like Ramon said, we're a bunch of New Yorkers. We're all Dominicans for the most part as well. We started back in 2017, before it was even legal to even say you were a cannabis anything in New York. And Ramon and his co-founders and just a lot of the team have been in the legacy market for a long time. And we kind of, having that background, we started back in 2017 throwing these cannabis parties in our famous lounge downtown on 38th Street. And from there, we evolved to encompass advocacy, merchandising, media, and hopefully licenses soon. So prayer to the OCM guys. So
right. I'm going to sacrifice this joint, to the OCM gods. By the way, you know what? I know that Vlad's from uptown, right? I'm from Shaolin, Staten Island. Are you guys also uptown? Where are you guys from in the city?
Absolutely. We're all uptown natives. Harlem, Washington Heights, Hamilton Heights is all pretty much the same area. But yeah, we're definitely from the same born and raised Manhattan guys.
Yeah, I'm from 135th Street between Broadway and Riverside. Vlad's from 139th between Broadway and Riverside. Ramon's from
157 between Broadway and Amsterdam. So it's all like, we're all from the same area.
2 train stops away. Vicinity.
All right. Yeah, I had to come into the high school for city, take like a bus and a ferry and everything. But I spent some time up there, at parties and everything, sitting on stoops. Was my favorite thing in the 40s, right? That's the way we all grew up. Well, here's one thing I think is like interesting, right? So I didn't come to the Munkey when I heard that there was like, you had to give your driver's license or whatever, despite the invites. And I always heard about the crazy times there. What made you guys go a little bit with, what we're now calling in the industry, like the on-site consumption model and those parties? Like why, we're in terms of legacy, so that you have history and legacy, but, you didn't just go the delivery route. You went down this other route. So I'm curious to know like the genesis of that.
Well, like David mentioned earlier, a lot of us already were in the legacy market, right? So a lot of the things that people started to do now, we already did before it was like cool or famous, or you put it on Instagram, or we were already selling weed. We were already moving back and forth to other states and doing all these other things. So for us, it was more about what can we do that's different with weed, because it's something that we love. We love weed. So we started with the speakeasy party, right? With the speakeasy style parties. And at the time, the only parties you would be able to attend where there was a lot of weed smoking in situations were something that you call a session, right? Where a bunch of different companies and vendors will come and sell weed to you, right? Instead of it being some sort of lounge where, yes, there's a dispensary, but it's more of an experience, a lounge, a DJ, entertainment, and just basically bringing that New York hospitality mixed with the Dominican hospitality situation, where we were able to kind of like make people feel great at the same time and make everybody feel VIP at the same time, right? So it was more about doing something different than what we were already doing. that also kind of helped us to pivot, like David said earlier, pivot to advocacy work and pivot towards learning how to do compliant events, right? Because it just happened as things came, right? As obstacles came our way, we were willing to take it on, right? So prohibition lifted. So now it was like, for us, it was like, okay, well, things changed. Now you can actually smoke. So what do we do from now, right? So you kind of like learn how to evolve with each situation that comes along.
Yeah, I'm going to build off of that too. Like, we have a lot of conversations about what Happy Munkey is and what licensing we're going for and things like that. But I think a big theme of Happy Munkey is we're not doing what everybody else is doing or what people 100% expect of us. We grow very organically, and while social consumption is something that we helped pioneer in the city, 5-6 years ago, it's something that while we look forward, we want to continue innovating. We don't want to just be a consumption brand or a lounge brand like people kind of assume of us, even though we did that really well. We've been able to add a lot of different pieces to Happy Munkey. And I want to shout out, I've been there. I was actually there this August, but Ramon took a trip to Amsterdam right before we started Happy Munkey, which really helped solidify he can definitely explain it, but I was just out there in August, and I feel like what Amsterdam has done and is currently still doing definitely impacted the way we saw consumption back in 2017. And so we've continued just to shape it up and just change it, as whatever gets thrown at us, we're going to, learn how to hit that pitch.
Got it. So actually, we had some questions we're going to discuss. So as you said, it's growing organically, right? What is, I always like to say, like you're playing Tokerdamus, right? So picture yourself predicting the future with a wizard hat that's looks like a joint, you know what I'm saying? Like in that kind of shape. Like, what is your goal? Right? If you just had your druthers and everything, what would Happy Munkey be, down the road from now, 5 years or something like that?
Well, for me, I look at it as the global phenomenon that was Happy Munkey coming out of 42nd Street being something that people can have in, every metropolitan market, whether it be the lounge, the brand, the store, that kind of Dominican hospitality that Ramon was talking about, that being something that we're able to really scale and bring to the entire world. That's something that I dream of. We're working on a merch line right now that I hope to see not just in, other dispensaries and things like that, but being more in, in streetwear and fashion wear and even our advocacy. We're doing stuff with the Dominican Republic. And after this conversations this weekend, even looking at ways to just change the whole Latino space, not just in our home country, the Dominican Republic. So for me, Happy Munkey's really evolved to a movement and just being, comfortable and safe and just, loving cannabis in a way that isn't, just stereotypical stoner, but just more so, part of that habitual way of life that a lot of us, incorporate cannabis. So, yeah. Got it.
By the way, just for the record, I'm pulling for the Dominican Republic in the World Baseball Classic. That's going to be potentially the best lineup of all time. Right. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Though it's kind of lame that Fernando Tatis, even with the steroid stuff, can't even compete in that thing, because that would be even more ridiculous if he was on the table there. Sorry, baseball guy. I know Dominican, it's like a religion there. So I always love that, pulling for it. So, I think that this sounds like, kind of interesting in terms of you don't want limitations, right? I mean, you have what is known, I think, the most known brand out of New York. And I think that is to a certain extent a function of the fact that you had that consumption element to it, the parties of it that was open and out there, luckily, didn't have major issues, I guess, before we got decriminalized, and legalized, so my question is also this, right? So talking about the consumption model, what do you think you learned from the events that you had that will be applicable to that road in the legal market? Because consumption's new, really, around the country when it comes down to it. I think that a big turning point that we cover in the podcast when monitoring is Las Vegas, right? When Vegas gets their consumption models up and going, that's going to be visible. But the other thing is New York. New York, this is going to be here relatively, from the start. And I'm not calling having 3 stores open the real start of the market, right? It's going to be a complicated rollout. So, I'm curious to know if there's kind of little lessons that, you talk about, Dominican hospitality, any other lessons that you think that you got from the experience of running these parties and everything that you'll translate over if I guess you're talking about different license types. And David, you and I, whenever we talk, I always like having, great conversations, throwing out strategy and stuff, just as I find, because they geek out over it. What do you think that you could apply, right, to, an on-site consumption or other stuff in the legal regulated market?
I think I'll start with something I think as simple as hiring the right staff. I think you want to make sure that you hire a team that work well together, that you can kind of see the energy, right? Before you even walk in, you feel some sort of way before you walk into whether it's a dispensary, whether it's a consumption lounge. You want to make sure that these people really love being there. You want to make sure that these people really care about the people that are walking in, the consumers, the members, right? For me, that's a real big deal. I think you don't necessarily need scholars. You don't need the most smartest people, but we're not looking for that. You're looking for the most loving and humble person, right? Because you want to make sure that everyone who walks into your establishment feels important. And I think that was a big deal for us, that we made everyone feel important. So yeah, one way or another, that'll translate towards business, that'll translate the way people spend. But I really, really think that the big deal is the way you hire your staff and the staff that actually works there.
And on a separate note, something that I see as this comes online in other states, like, you can't keep the lights on a community space like that by selling waters and snacks. Right. You need to be able to sell cannabis on site. And, I've seen people who smoke a joint a month to people who literally face 2 to 3 ounces a week. You know what I mean? And the appetite is not something that's really, you can't just one fits all with that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think really just having, like you were saying, the no limits mark. I don't want to say, oh, you can buy 5 pounds in one consumption lounge. I'm not saying that, but I do want to just say that if you want these businesses to be successful and not, just in show, you need to allow them to sell cannabis on site.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, look, and I also want to, note for the audience, right, that we are still to a certain extent operating in a vacuum. We're talking about consumption in New York, right? Because we're still don't know, how the regs will shake out with respect to it. But, there's an issue, obviously, like this whole model of, Jersey, where, oh, no, you can't serve alcohol and you can't serve food. In California, we're dealing with something similar, as I serve as, secretary of the Cannabis Beverage Association, they also have bullshit limitations like that are completely arbitrary. Right. So I also think that, as you said, you don't want your hands tied in terms of ways to potentially, make money. Right. You want the freedom of being able to serve whatever it is that you want to serve to make your money.
Just to say something too, we also proudly didn't serve alcohol, right? We created an alcohol-free space where other people who like to smoke and drink, I sometimes do, and I'm not frowning upon that, but in terms of creating alcohol, once you bring it into a social space, you welcome a different kind of energy, a different kind of security concern and things like that. So we, as Happy Munkey, just saw it as a smarter thing to keep the things separate. But, I've been to New Woo Cannabis Cafe out in Vegas where, it's reservation land. So they're able to serve you an infused Moscow Mule and things like that. So I've seen it done really tastefully. But for on the record for us, we really didn't see the two needing to be mixed for you to have a good time.
Got it. And also, it comes down to economics, right? It's economics of, how does an on-site consumption where you're paying, rent or whatever compete versus retail, generate from the square foot. But, right. I also personally agree. I always said in college, right, that your social crew is determined by your drug of choice, right? And there are the people, what I'm saying? There could be the people out at the loud bar, getting, drunk and dancing. And they're the people who just wanted to be chilling, passing around a J, smoking a hookah, and it was just a different vibe. And you'll never guess which one I found myself in. So, I also think this ties into consumption and parties and everything is this, there's this focus in the industry right now about the high potency products, right? And there's I talk about the, the connoisseurs who like the high potency products because they got their, higher tolerance and everything, and the kind of curious and, they don't have as high tolerance. I fall in the low tolerance camp just because I'm an old man, but I'm curious also your thoughts in terms of the types of products, also just from experience in Happy Munkey, right? Is, for when you're hanging out socially, do you think that, low dose products, a J, maybe a spliff mixed with some tobacco or something, that there's going to be something coming out of consumption in terms of like the industry is going to seg in the opposite direction of, high dose products, because lower dose makes more sense when you're trying to hang out with your friends for a couple hours?
I think it just depends like who you are. Like for me, this is 2023 marks my decade of consuming concentrates. And I'm a concentrate smoker. Like I socially smoke a joint if you pass it, but if I'm at home, I have a rig, I'm hitting my, one of my e-rigs or something like that. I love smoking hash rosin. I used to take, I used to mediate and get clean medicine for women with cancer. And so I've had RSO at Access for years now. And, sometimes I take RSO, and it's definitely a more high potency high, and so I've also dabbed with my friends at the Munkey. I remember we would have people bring in their motherships and their rigs and wild stuff like that and be completely functional, because that's the way they get down. So I don't think it's a one fits all kind of thing. And also you mentioned tobacco, like everyone smokes with Graba and Fronto right now. If I take a hit of tobacco, my night's over. Like I'm calling an Uber and I'm leaving, because it just completely changes my night up. It just all depends on the person. I think that's the beautiful thing about cannabis from what we saw at Happy Munkey.
Yeah, I just think if we're able to have these consumption lounges, I think you're going to see evolution of how it's consumed in real time, because it's New York. So things kind of change all the time, right? We were able to, David actually was kind of one of the people who introduced a lot of folks into concentrates, into dabbing, into the Puffco, into all these things. Like these things were very brand new in 2017, especially to the New York culture. The person who's never left New York, guarantee has never dabbed. They look at it a different way. A lot of people don't even smoke bongs here, right? Because it's like they into joints and blunts here. So it's like a lot of things that, as far as like having a consumption lounge, I think you're gonna see different ways of using it and consuming in real time, new shit all the time.
Yeah, for sure. Like I remember when we first started the dab room, it was when like the third or fourth party. I was in a corner with a bunch of like BHO and a torch. And people were looking at me like I was smoking crack, and I had to like really just like coerce people to like, no, it's worth it. It's it's worth trying. And then 2-3 years later, I'm seeing people come in with $1,000 rigs, $2,000 rigs, talking about low temp, the evolution of hash rosin, and like all this different stuff. Where I saw people learn not only like learning themselves, but coming with information from other states and sharing with other curious people.
Yeah.
I saw a person who says they're a low doser, take a dab. And then now every time I'm thinking of Deborah Johnson, right? She's just someone who I gave a first dab to. And every time I see her, she has like almost a terp bag of different concentrates she's smoking now, a dip device, a Puffco, a this or that. And she always reminds me of the fact that I turned her on to dabbing. And like now she's beyond a connoisseur. So it's beautiful to see stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like the way that I picture it ultimately is just like, we reference alcohol in all these different ways, but I think about walking to a bar and they're the people who could have their Bacardi 151 shots if they want, right? And there's the people who could have their glass of wine that they're going to be nursing, right? And so there's just going to be, hopefully, this kind of, plethora of pot products that can suit people of different, tolerance levels and everything, because the fact is that there's such a variation there. So I think that kind of makes a lot of sense, as you said, right? There might be the people sipping on beverages, there might be the people hitting up dab rigs. And it's just, kind of pick your pot, not poison, pick your pot perfume, right? Like I said, puns, alliteration, man. I've wordplay.
And even smoke-free rooms, right? We talk about drinks and edibles and things like that. There are a lot of people who don't, from whether it be specific ailments, allergies, whatever it may be, respiratory issues, who want to be in smoke-free rooms. And that's something that, we never were able to fully pioneer because, the way history and COVID and all these things kind of ended up happening to our club. But like, that's something that I think about a lot, and just creating the most effective consumption spaces for that type of consumer, not just, go for it.
I think super astute point there. Right. Because I think some of the kind of curious, I like to say, people that I know, who just won't be around smoke and will always judge it, versus those of us who just love smoke and,
exactly.
Feel like it's like one of the defining relationships of our lives in certain fashions. So that's something that I feel like has not been tossed around a lot, and is, a really, really clever, smart idea for it, right? In terms of wanting to give people the choice in terms of, what they're going to be, what they could be doing. Now, I'm curious to know, obviously, we're still early goings in New York in terms of the rollout. New York has done some things that no one else has tried to do. I'm curious to know what you think, the regulators and stuff, like what's going right about the market launch right now, and where are your kind of, concerns in terms of how things are, playing out and going forward?
Well, first I'll say I'm glad you mentioned it, right? So the fact that New York is trying something different and trying something new and trying a new approach is what I love. Does it need to be perfect? Not necessarily. But does it have to be new? Does it have to be different? I say yes, right? Because if we keep on doing the same approach that maybe California did, maybe Chicago, New Jersey, these different places, then I think we're just falling into the same bullshit all over again, right? Is the retail rollout perfect? Not so much, right? Because it's like you just said, there's only about 3 stores rolled out so far. We definitely absolutely need more. There's a need for more. There's a need for safer cannabis, right? There's a need for making sure that people get safe product. Does the process need to be faster? Maybe not. We don't know, right? That's the whole thing, right? We want it to be faster, but does that necessarily mean it to be a better program? We do not know. And that's what I think. I think we don't know. I'm okay with the different approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, sorry. I mean, Dave, because with the camera, I can't see you when you're about to start talking. I apologize. I mean, my thing I'll say is this, right? Just to interject very, quickly, like one of the things that we're seeing that's causing an issue, obviously, is, there's $750 million worth of weed, right? Mostly upstate, right? I call it Farmageddon, and there's 3 stores open. Right? So that seems to be where we're at right now. And the other thing that I'll, mention, for listeners, just to kind of like, acclimate them to where we are right now is, the DASNY fund. And I'm sorry, I like to do my standard disclaimer. The regulators have the best intentions. I would never want their job and admire them for taking it on. Nothing personal, right? All our comments are really just, kind of calling it like we see it. And so the other thing, obviously, that's, kind of come out recently after, certain Mara muckraking reporters is that, that DASNY $150 million fund, there ain't a dime in it. Sounds like, right? And so, the fund to open up all these conditional retail stores, it doesn't have the money in it. So I just wanted to interject that point. And David, sorry for interrupting. You're about to start your point.
Well, I think they're good points. And to Ramon's credit and point too, I think I'm just proud to be from New York and be, able to be with these folks who, I know Ramon put in a card application, and so did another co-founder, Vladimir. And so the fact that these gentlemen get the opportunity to apply first, and the state is valuing them, and making sure the billionaire MSOs aren't in the mix as well to compete with off the rip, I think is really a beautiful thing. I was just up in Albany caucus weekend and was talking to a politician who, very vigilant towards the cannabis program, and she said, New York is a special place. We do things bigger than anybody else. We fuck up way bigger, we fix it, and then it's the best place in the world.
Right.
And so it's something I look forward to. I'm not excited for that fuck up, but I'm excited for the, them trying to do something no one else has done, and then trying to do something no one else has done. And then additionally, the one thing I would say I want to see done better is, like I said, I'm a connoisseur smoker. I love hash rosin. I love, good. I'm nothing against sun grown, because, sometimes that does, scratch a certain itch. But I would love to see some really insane light depths, some really amazing indoor. Mm-hmm. I would love to see some hash products that I'm proud of, as opposed to hitting up my homies in Michigan or Colorado or California, and they're just flexing on me with all the crazy hash they're growing. I can't wait till New York is at a place where, we have a concentrate and flower market that, can compete, or at least be, stand next to these kind of havens of amazing smoke out west.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, the first grows, a lot of them were outdoors. It was, I think politics, right, has, dictated how things have played out a lot in the state, and obviously I think that, hemp farmers were crushed, politically, they were able to achieve certain goals and everything. So I think it's, partially why it's played out the way that it has. We could fuck up bigger,
Right.
everything's bigger in New York now. And you touched upon something else though, right? In terms of like the higher concentrated products, that THC tax, man, that potency tax sitting there, that is something built in from the beginning that I've talked to big parties from other states, big brands, and said, we're just sitting out in New York right now because we don't see where the money is necessarily be made. And the other thing I wanted to get your thoughts on is the legacy market, I feel, is one thing, right? There are people who have, paid the price for the war on drugs, which was awfully enforced and unfairly enforced in ways that are sickening, right? But, there's also this issue right now in terms of since the law legalized and decriminalized, you have, some authorities said 1,400, stores that have opened up across the city since the law passed, selling stuff, some of my clients' products from the West Coast brands, ones that, somehow found their way here. Some are counterfeit. And now there's even talks, I saw like an op-ed somewhere in like New York Cannabis Insider or wherever saying, oh, maybe we should let these people, cross over to the legal market, these stores open up. Do you think that that's fair to the legit legacy operators? I kind of feel like they're can of carpetbaggers. They popped up, out of nowhere, rolled up. And it's like, that's just my 2 cents. I'm curious to hear your take on it.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of takes on that, right? I think first, this is New York, so we should expect people trying to capitalize off whatever the new thing is, right? So I think this is what we're pretty much watching. Is it fair for those who've been putting in the work for a very long time? Not so much, right? But also, I think now because of that, and because what's been happening in other states, I think the state now has more of an interest to go ahead and build these pathways for these legacy markets that have been around for a long time and who have, like you said, they've been around for a long time, right? These people do have their retail situations where they have been serving customers for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, right? Even the last 10 years, right? Because I'm not going to take away a young legacy guy, right? Because even a young legacy guy, you got to give him his credit. Even though he started young, he got 10 years in the game. You got to give him his credit. But for now, for all these shop owners that back when things were legacy, they didn't really necessarily back up the market. They didn't really necessarily like help that market for them to kind of like take advantage. I'm not saying for them to take advantage, but for the state to give them preference, I think it'll be crazy.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I don't want to see anyone go to jail for cannabis anymore. I don't think people should be like spending any more nights in jail for cannabis on any degree. But I don't think it's fair for a lot of, the delis and people like to Ramon's point, who, like I remember if I tried smoking in front of a deli or like came in smelling like weed or like looked like I was up to no good, quote unquote, 10 years ago, a couple years ago, the deli people were never really messing with me. You know what I mean? And now for them to have a slew of products, mushrooms, weed, everything, shiny bags, everything that, we're having whole meetings on how do we, package a Happy Munkey product? What is the store outside going to look like? How do we make sure the community boards are okay with it? And like, we've had to I always say I've gotten multiple MBAs or graduate program amount of information from learning how to actually deal with the legal market because we were legacy folk. So for someone just to kind of skip us or now be on the same level as people like Happy Munkey and a bunch of other brands too that I can mention that have put in that work, I think would be disrespectful to the journey companies and people like us have taken to really want to be tax-paying cannabis operators.
Agree. Right? It doesn't seem quite fair, right? The people who've put in the work. And by the way, I didn't say it up front, but honestly, as someone who believes so much in this industry, who is so sickened and just can't believe, how the war on drugs is politicized and used to marginalize and just really destroy certain communities and families and everything. Thank you for your service in New York and pushing this forward, right? Like you said, You guys have not just been about, being out there and operating. You've been activists, right? To help get this done the right way. So honestly, thank you. I don't want to forget to say that, the people who've really been the true believers, who've really been pushing this forward for all of us, right? Because we're all ultimately in this together. That's not the people who just, open up the stores to profit, like we were saying, that's all those guys. Now, I also just have a question in terms of the, consumption model a little bit, right? Like we're still fighting, the remnants of the war on drugs. There's still a stigma, right? Do you think that consumption and being able to enjoy it socially, could that have an impact on the overall picture, on the federal level, and attitudes? Like, just curious to know your thoughts about that.
I think I say yes, right? Because even though we couldn't put it down on paper, we couldn't document a lot of things that we did during our consumption era, during our speakeasy era, we did change the way people looked at it, right? That was it. That was like our big spiel right there. It was our big social experiment where we showed people that just socializing and smoking weed together can change everything. It did bring people from different walks of life together, right? And they were able to kind of like, oh shit, we got this common goal where we love weed, but we also want to see weed legal, and we also want to be able to partake legal. And these people make connections there where they would never, ever in a million years make a connection. They wouldn't make that connection in a regular club. They wouldn't make that connection in a restaurant or even in school, right? Because you got these different classes. So it's like, this was a moment where, the hippie, where the flower power hippie movement was happening in real time in modern era, right? Because people say, what happened to the hippies? Well, we were right there. We are them. We are the modern day hippies. We are bringing all these people together, and we are literally, by example, showing you how peaceful cannabis consumption parties are, events are.
Yeah, and I think it's just an education thing, It's just the way people learn, and you learn by seeing and practice. And that's something that, we did 7 days a week, And I'm excited to see how Vegas rolls out. I'm excited to see how the OCM decides to, roll it out here. But I think and people you could smoke anywhere. You could smoke cigarettes here in New York, right? So there are people, like the culture of people smoking outside, and I don't want to say just smoking anywhere helps change people's minds, because it really doesn't. But I think that like sense of community and safe place, like people used to come to our club and say, this could be 500 feet, 1,000 feet away from a house of worship and not interfere with that. You know what I mean? Those are things where people can see it actually operating and seeing, oh, this is just another part of civilization, another part of society, that it really helps kind of reprogram the way that their like stigmatized brain is kind of working. So I think consumption spaces are really big in pushing that agenda forward.
And I think that you touched upon something also remote. I think both of you touched upon something that weed is a uniter, right? Like a lot of people, not necessarily a divider. Just to the event or across stand-up comedy, the Cannabis stand-up comedy thing I did last week. I was looking around when I'm on stage. I'm like, there are people. It's so diverse. The group,
absolutely,
right? In terms of age, ethnicities, whatever. Ramon, you're a Dominican dude. You just said spiel, right? You dropped the Yiddish thing in a conversation with the Jewish guy, right? So we all love weed,
exactly,
right? And so, hell, even a bunch of the more conservative folk are fans too. Don't just assume that they're not. But I thought that was an interesting example, right? New York is the melting pot. I think that, the interesting thing that we're seeing with some of these mature markets like Colorado, where the market's actually starting to shrink for the first time. And it's one of the reasons there is canna tourism. And I said, hey, what happens? I'm thinking in my head, what happens when everybody legalizes? What happens to canna tourism? It just turns into tourism. And then New York, right, and the places that are the biggest tourist sites, they're going to have that element. And so that's why I also think that, once things are going with that, then people are going to come, they're going to come to the chain of Happy Munkey stuff. They're going to experience it, and it's going to kind of, change the, change their opinions on it, hopefully. As I like to say, right, legalization acceptance doesn't happen bit by bit, but hit by hit.
Hit by hit.
Right. So, with you guys having what I really think is, probably certainly the most visible New York brand, right? You guys got different, the social media following, everything. Now, I, work with clients, I have contacts, at conferences, West Coast brands are sold in these 1,400 stores, that are open in the city, right? I mean, a lot of the, country's been getting their stuff from California for decades. So there's this kind of attitude I've encountered where you have these West Coast brands being like, look, we're making moves to New York. Obviously that's a huge market. It's where they want to be because also, their markets are struggling. It's like the new frontier and they know it's going to be big. But there's almost a little bit kind of like a confidence there that, oh no, we got the product, we got the processes. We're going to go in there. We're going to dominate. You guys are an East Coast brand. I'm from Staten Island. I'm from Shaolin. I got a little bit of a pride thing when it comes down to that. What do you guys think in terms of how things will play out in the New York market between existing brands that people know in New York because they've been getting the products out the back door and the East Coast brands like you folks, other ones that might rise up? How do you think that ends up playing out, a couple of years down the road?
I think people in New York love supporting New Yorkers, right? And so there's a lot of pride attached to, just the purchases and what I'm seeing here in New York, right? And so I think a lot of the reasons a lot of these California brands haven't completely infiltrated the market is because these farmers and processors aren't, having their arms open for these California, Colorado, anywhere on the West Coast, anywhere that's not New York. I don't want to, just make it a California thing. Mm-hmm. And I think the same way you want to go shop at your farmer's market or go support locally owned shops and things like that. It's the same way I think people are going to go out of their way. The education is really big too around just educating what products are there, and the consumers are going to look for those Black-owned brands, women-owned brands, veteran-owned brands, New York-grown brands. And I think those are things that people make their decision with their dollar, and that's something I think New Yorkers are really good at. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and I kind of look at the cannabis, I guess, consumer a little bit different, right? It's not like a person who drinks whiskey, right? If a person who drinks whiskey is going to drink any type of whiskey because he only got, whether he got $10 or he got $50, he's going to run after that whiskey, right? It doesn't matter where the whiskey come from, he's just chasing whiskey. I think when it comes to cannabis, when people want a certain brand, they want that brand. They don't necessarily want to try a billion other stuff. They just want that brand.
Got it. Yeah. So, I mean, there's just New Yorkers are also, they would differentiate. They're smart, like you said, right? They could see through BS. They got BS meters, right? That are more advanced than anyone's. I agree. And I think that, I guess also you folks are, in terms of conversations or whatever, had you guys are not just, you guys are looking to spread the brand in all these different facets, not have it be just a New York thing, right? That there will be brands. I think you guys are well positioned, asset light model, licensing, you spread across, the country in the opposite direction, right? So I think that was something you also said was kind of in terms of part of the plan in not, limiting yourself. So anything else that you folks, kind of wanted to touch upon? I think we covered a lot of the, the interesting questions I definitely wanted to run by you guys. And I'm just kind of, excited for what's to come. New York's going to be a roller coaster, as we've already seen, but we're in it together. And you guys are certainly, you got the running head start. I feel like that other people don't necessarily, will have.
I think something I guess I want just you to know and our audience to know is in addition to Happy Munkey being the entertainment and being, the brand and people have loved for a long time, we are making a concerted effort to work on our community impact efforts. We're starting a Happy Munkey Community Impact, which, we just did an event this last Thursday where we flew in the leaders of the legalization movement from the Dominican Republic to talk about how, us as Dominicans can help impact that situation in the DR and hopefully, larger conversations about all of Latin America. We're looking to, not just, we always say we do it for the culture, not the clout. And so really putting that into practice and really just, who better to help our communities than us, And so instead of just going to different nonprofits or funds and, we don't really see what that looks like. We've done it. We've thrown events where we've employed 20 to 25 people from our community, put money in their pockets and seen the way that their lives have changed. And so that's something that with, just that pivot and innovation that we keep doing, we haven't forgotten where we come from and we don't plan on doing that either.
Well spoken, my man. Well spoken.
All right. I think that's probably a good place to end right there. So like I said, thank you guys for your service. Thank you for your continued service. You said in terms of like, there's a sense of fairness there, right? We want to build up and help the people that deserve to be helped, the people who paid an unfortunate price, in relation to, unequal enforcement of laws and everything. I just appreciate you guys taking the time. And I'm, kind of excited to see what tomorrow holds on the New York roller coaster.